Please rise for our customary opening prayer. O God, author of all wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, we ask thy guidance in our consultations to the end that truth and justice may prevail in all of our judgments. Amen. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start this morning with some very special presentations, and I'm going to make my way over here. So, Council, we have some very special guests in the gallery with us today, and I'd like to welcome them. These are citizens who are here to help us recognize some historically significant places in our city. As a council, we have made a commitment to identify, protect, and manage places of historical significance in Calgary so that future generations can remember the people and places that played an important role in the development of our great city. Today, we're recognizing citizens who have helped us fulfill this commitment through the Calgary Heritage Authority Plaque Program. This year, 3 sites have been chosen to receive interpretive plaques. These sites are vetted by the Calgary Heritage Authority, whose decisions are based on the significance of the architecture, history, and context of the site. So Mr. Scott Jolliffe is here, representing the Calgary Heritage Authority, the chairman of the authority. If you could please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor Nenshi and members of council for having us here today. I'm advised to stick strictly to the script. They have the hook ready. They have a hook ready for me if I don't, so I will. Since 1991, the Calgary Heritage Authority has been presenting the community heritage plaques to commemorate and raise awareness of heritage in Calgary communities. The sites being recognized today were nominated by Calgary community groups and individuals. They were selected by the CHA because of their importance to Calgary's historical evolution. We encourage Calgarians to continue to nominate sites for the plaque recognition program. Before we start, I would like to recognize a few people in the gallery. Leslie Beal, the chair of the CHA Public Awareness Chair, as well as Daryl Cario and Clint Robertson of the city's Heritage Planning Group. Take a bow, guys, if you're around to see Leslie, Daryl, Clint. Thank you. I would also like to thank Melanie McKenzie from the Land Use Planning and Policy Group for putting together the communication strategy for today. Melanie, thank you. Mayor Nenshi, we will be honored if you can make these heritage plaque presentations.
I would be very happy to do so. The first plaque recognizes the historic significance of the Bridgeland Riverside vacant lot garden. Even before it became part of Calgary in 1907, Bridgeland Riverside was a community filled with gardens. The first settlers depended on their gardens for survival. In 1914, the city formed the Vacant Lots Garden Club as a way to put undeveloped lots to good use and beautify Calgary. By the 1920s, residents of McDougall Road were gardening on a stretch of city-owned land below the escarpment between 6th Street and 7A Street Northwest, leased from the club. The Bridgeland Riverside Vacant Lots Garden is the last remaining original vacant lot program. This site symbolizes the gardening heritage of the community as an important part of Calgary's community gardening history. Its preservation as a city park in 2008 helped revive interest in community gardening. So could we have Mike Ricketts, the nominator and gardener, along with Gareth Lukes, the Community Association VP, and Lori Lasawi, past president of the Community Association, come up to receive the plaque. It may look like an ordinary street, but Spiller Road was once part of an ancient trail used by Aboriginal peoples in Alberta for thousands of years. The trail led to an important ford at the confluence of the Bow and Elbow rivers. When the Northwest Mounted Police built Fort Calgary in 1875, a section of the Old North Trail became Macleod Trail, the main supply route between Fort Calgary, Fort Macleod, and Fort Benton further south in Montana. The city rerouted McLeod Trail to 2nd Street Southeast in 1967. The Ramsey section of the old trail was renamed Spiller Road after Edward Vincent Spiller, 1878 to 1970, a prominent Boy Scout leader in Calgary. Would Lexi Schmeier, president of the Ramsey Community Association, please come forward to accept this plaque? You can bring your community members too if you like, Lexi. It's Art Matsui and Adele Sonoy. Congratulations. And the third plaque commemorates the Mission Bridge. Bridges have always played a significant role in Calgary's history. In 1885, Father Albert Lacombe suggested that a bridge in this location would save farmers of the Southwest from having to make longer trips to cross the river at Inglewood. Completed in 1915, the Mission Bridge was the first concrete bridge built in Alberta, and it helped connect the communities of Mission, Roxborough, and Rideau Park. The bridge structure that's in place today is the third bridge on that site, and even today, this river crossing continues to be an important gateway into the city's core. Would Bob Lang, president of the Mission Cliff Bungalow Community Association, please come forward to accept this plaque? We will put them up. And in fact, all three of these historic plaques have played an important role in, all three of these historic sites, I should say, have played an important role in Calgary's development. And the plaques that we presented today will help make Calgarians aware of their significance. And in the near future, these plaques will be permanently mounted at those sites. So on behalf of City Council, I extend thanks and congratulations to all the individuals and groups who have worked to make these places recognized as community heritage sites, and a special thank you to all the volunteers and all the work they do with the Calgary Heritage Authority. So thank you all, and thank you for joining us today. All right, then, we are in question period. For question period, Alderman Collier-Cart. Okay, Alderman Marr.
On the agenda, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Your Worship, I've just got a quick question regarding Trojan 1 and the corporate sponsorship program. In February 2009, Trojan 1 audit was completed, at which time they presented a short and long-term plans for the corporation, and many of them were including creating a framework which would include pricing strategy, how we would approach potential sponsors, and I'm wondering where we are with that and how we would report back to Council.
Mr. Stevens?
Your Worship, I don't have that information on hand, but I'd be happy to follow up with Customer Service and Communications, get an update, and provide a memo to members of Council if that would help.
That would be great. I know that we have a variety of things that we're looking at in order to advance the corporation along. I think that private industry could be good partners with us.
We can give you an update. I know that was one of the items that we talked about briefly at budget time, that we would look at funding for ongoing funding for support of that program, and I'll provide you an update in that memo.
Thank you. And Mr. Stevens, is there a mechanism that it is coming back to Council, or is it just between your office and mine?
I would let you know. I'm not aware of a further update that's currently planned to come back to Council, but I'll find that information out as part of this update.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Marr. Any other questions for question period? On the agenda then, I know we have a number of additions and deletions. Can I first please have a motion to add tabled report to the agenda, CPS 2011-61, Protection Against Residential Fires and Fire Spread? This was meant to be on the agenda and it was inadvertently dropped. Oh, sorry. I always get that wrong. Thanks, Alderman Lowe. And Alderman Jones will second that. All right, so now we've got it on the table. So I will need an amendment. Alderman Collier-Cart, were you adding the tabled report?
Well, I was going to add that one because I had asked for it to be tabled, but it doesn't matter.
No, you just moved it, so thank you.
The one that I'd like to add is Alderman Lowe and I would like to add an item, a personnel item to the in-camera session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got a quick motion here to add a tabled report and the a personnel report in camera. Alderman Marr is seconding. Are we agreed? Any opposed? Okay. So we've got that. We've got a personnel item. All right. I was just about to ask Alderman Chabot, but he's just coming in. Would someone like to add as a matter of urgent business, the GreenTRIP application proposal? Thanks, Alderman Keating. Do I have a second? Thanks, Alderman Demong. On that one, are we agreed? Any opposed? All right. So that one is in. I have a whole whack of other changes, and I may ask for a motion to accept them all, but does anyone have any others? Okay, so if I could have a motion to add the following, please. In camera, AOC 2011-07, report from Council on review of ward office resources, a verbal report on the Calgary Police Commission appointment. We just added an in-camera personnel item, but I have 3 in-camera personnel items. And I think that's it. So thanks, Alderman Pincott. Alderman Stevenson, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Strat planning for February, the date.
Thank you. So I'll take a motion to add as urgent business a change to the date for our February strategic planning session. Thanks, Alderman Stevenson. Alderman Pincott seconding. On that one, are we agreed? Any opposed? Okay, carried. Anything else, Madam Clerk, that I'm missing here? Okay, great. So then we'll just, we have the motion to accept the agenda, Alderman Lowe?
Your Worship, I think there's a significant expectation by the media and the public that there'll be a discussion about NMAX.
That was one of the personnel items that I added in camera.
Okay, just as long as it's there.
All right then, so then the agenda as amended, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right, confirmation of minutes. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes? Thanks, Alderman Chabot. Alderman Hodges, thank you. Any changes to the minutes? All right then, are we agreed? Carried. Okay. Consent agenda. Can I have a motion to move the consent agenda, please? Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Alderman Jones, thank you. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes, Alderman Jones.
Your Worship, I was wondering if you could pull CPS 2011-06.
Yeah, we sure can, and I will add that to, where is it here? So we'll make that 7.2.2. Okay. So we'll take it right after 7.2.1 on the agenda. Anyone else? Alderman Chabot?
Thank you, Worship. If you could pull out CPS 2010-02, as well as, I think 2011-05 and 06 are somewhat related, so I think through 2011-06 I can address my issues.
So, sorry, you want to pull out CPS 2011-02, 05, and 06?
Alderman Jones pulled out 06, and I believe 05 is somewhat
Oh, I see.
related, so I don't think there's a need to pull out 05.
Okay. Okay, so this one, and this one, and we'll deal with all of those matters under the CPS report on the agenda. Anyone else?
Yes.
2011-02. Okay. All right then. So then, can we approve then the consent agenda with those items removed? On that, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Any opposed? All right. Very well. That then takes us to item 7.1.1 on your agenda, report. Oh, sorry, we have let's deal with the fire one first. You're right. That's where we put it. So that takes us then to the tabled report, CPS 2011-61, on residential fires and fire spread in the city of Calgary. Alderman Collier-Card.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, thank you for tabling this for a week. I just needed a bit more time to review a lot of the correspondence on this matter and consult with a few folks on it. And before you, you'll have some amendments that I circulated to each of you that are on your desk. Madam Clerk, if you could put up the amendments. So in bold, I'll just introduce them, Your Worship. On number 1 is fine, the way it's written. And number 2 is in bold, encourage the Minister of Municipal Affairs to continue to consult with industry and other key stakeholders in proceeding with the recommendations. This is quite different, actually, than the way number 2 is written. It is directing the minister to proceed with these recommendations. There are 4 of them that are left that haven't been implemented for a variety of reasons. None of which is the financial impact of implementing these things. And at the end of the day, Your Worship, there's extra copies here too, Madam Clerk, for circulation to administration. At the end of the day, this is the jurisdiction of the province of Alberta when it comes to building code changes. So number 2 is just for us to continue to consult with industry and key stakeholders in proceeding down this road as it relates to high-intensity residential fires. Number 3 is to have the Calgary Fire Department and development and building approvals work in cooperation with industry on any proposed changes to the Alberta Building Code and the National Building Code aligned with the protection against residential fires and fire spread in the city of Calgary, as is written there, and to advise Council of code recommendations in advance. What this is getting at, Council, is we can't have this really is a policy direction of Council. If we want to get into the whole area of mandatory sprinklers for new residential development, this should then be a policy direction of Council. As it is now, the Chief of the Fire Department is advocating at both national and provincial levels that this be mandatory. It's not something that's necessarily mandated by development and building approvals. As you know, both codes are built around minimum requirements, not maximum requirements. So it's really important that the City of Calgary be on the same page, and the affected departments and business units be on the same page, and that this is a policy direction of Council. And that's what I'm asking for here, that they continue to work cooperatively with other key stakeholders, and if they are making code recommendations, that these come back to Council through the SPC on community and protective services. Number 5 that I've added, which is new, is asking to direct administration to work with key industry stakeholders and the Department of Municipal Affairs to determine the potential financial impact of the remaining 4 recommendations.
Excuse me, Alderman Collier-Card?
Yes.
The 4 recommendations there, which recommendations are you referring to on that?
Preceding, instead of remaining, preceding.
Sorry, I'm not following.
You have
Which 4 recommendations are you talking
Oh,
about?
they're referred to in the report, in the original report.
Administration's
With all of the recommendations that the minister has implemented, there are 4 remaining. And it's to really look at, and this is where the holdback is, provincial.
Oh, I see. On page 8, page 6 of 20 of the report.
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay.
I suppose I should reference that because there's...
We'll just add that in.
Thank you. So, industry has their view on this. The fire department has their view on this. So I think it would be nice if we could get some sense of what the overall financial impact would be if this were to come into play. And then number 6 is, Council, if you will look at the original handout, the attachment, and I don't know who wrote the report. It doesn't say it. It says... It's protection against residential fires and fire spread in the city of Calgary. It's administration's response. I don't know who in administration wrote this report, but it starts on page 649. But if you could flip to 656, please, in that report.
That was last week's agenda.
656.
Can you give us the page out of 20, Alderman Collier-Cart? Because the numbering is different.
So attached to the report, you'll see it's a report that looks like this. It's attachment 1.
Yeah.
1 of 20, page 8. Thank you. Page 8.
Right.
So if you go down to about the third paragraph, it talks about there are 2 additional research projects which are underway that are specifically studying sprinklering of single-family homes. So this is what my other amendment is, number 6. As a result of the 2 research projects with the National Research Council, and then the last paragraph there references the second study, which is being done by the fire department, and an internal document that is looking at the feasibility of residential sprinkler systems. They're looking at best practices. They're looking at existing programs in other municipalities, the conduct on a cost-benefit basis, a market and gap analysis. They're doing a whole bunch of things, which is great work that's being done. So as a result of those 2 research projects which are underway to specifically examine mandatory residential sprinkler systems, direct administration to report back through the SPC on CPS with policy options on the feasibility of mandatory residential sprinkler systems prior to the City of Calgary advocating for such a provincial policy. So,
Phew.
yeah.
All right. So that we can maintain procedurally clean on this, Alderman Collier-Cart, maybe I'll ask someone to move the original recommendation, then you can move this amendment. So can I have a mover for the original recommendation? Thanks, Alderman Jones. Seconded, Alderman McLeod. Alderman Collier-Cart, you're moving the amendments. Alderman Hodges, you're seconding.
Thank you, Alderman Hodges.
Okay. Oh, you're not. Okay, I need a seconder. Thanks, Alderman Demong. All right, so now on the amendment, okay? On the amendment, which is on the screen in front of you, Alderman Hodges.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start again. See if it works. Your Worship and members of Council, if it's the intent of Council not to proceed with lobbying the province for any changes in the building code, better known as the safety codes legislation, I'm sure the province will be quite happy to shelve it. It seems to me that pursuing studies and research ad infinitum is not going to really lead anywhere except for a long, long delay in implementing any changes whatsoever. So if the UDI group have some issues with this, they can easily communicate those to Council and to the province, and let the chips fall where they may with the province. It took a long time to get the province to agree, i.e. Municipal Affairs to agree to using the possibility of using different building materials to stop, or it doesn't really stop, slow down the spread of fire from one house to another after the big fires that occurred up in Edgemont and also in Royal Oak several years ago. So there were some changes in the code. It takes a long time to get changes in the code. I see this as not happening for 2 or 3 years if we adopt all of these recommendations. I'd like to see something proceed, either to a yes or no decision from the province. And as a result, I see that there's a request for consultation in these amendments, and that I'm sure would be happening in any case. But at some point in time, there has to be an end to this process to get some logical recommendations to the province so they can proceed or not proceed with changes in the building code. It takes a long, long time. As we know from several years ago, it takes a long, long time for the province to act on anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Hodges. Alderman Marr.
Thank you, Your Worship. We discussed this quite extensively at committee, and when we amended it again, it was brought forward for an amendment here. My concern is that we really don't have the authority at all with regards to directing the provincial government or the federal government in terms of health codes. So, or
I often
certificate
wish we
codes.
did.
Yes, well, wishing, if I could have a little magic lamp. I do have a couple of questions for administration of clarification at this time, if you'll permit me. And Mr. Tobert or perhaps Mr. Watson, or Dr. Hargesheimer, when we're, the interpretation of what is being asked here by Alderman Colley-Urquhart, do we have the authority to do any of these things? Do we have the ability to have any impact at all on what the provincial government might do or might not do with regards to this issue?
Mr. Watson?
Through the chair, thank you, Your Worship. Alderman Marr, we, certainly the fire department and DBA have and do sit on technical committees at both the provincial and the federal level. As Alderman Colley-Urquhart's opening comments mentioned, we have done a number of changes, and certainly the report that was done last year, of which there's still about 4 or 5 recommendations which have not been picked up by the province, but of the 22, 18 were accepted by the province. So yes, I think, in fact, we are in Calgary noted as one of the municipalities that is taking a real leadership position in both the national code and then as it's translated into the Alberta code. And we've been doing this for, I'd say, a decade and have been very successful at it. So the short answer is yes, we do have.
Well, that's
influencing. We do not have a mandatory, and we cannot force anyone to do anything, but we certainly bring a lot of good information to the table.
Well, that's important information, of course. And what the amendment is actually suggesting is that we encourage the minister to open up a dialogue with industry. And I think that anytime we're having a dialogue and working together, that has a huge impact on how projects can move forward and policy can be made. So I will be supporting this based on your response. Thank you, Alderman Colley-Urquhart. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Marr. Alderman McLeod?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just saw this morning. I haven't had time to reflect on these changes, but if I'm reading this correctly, it appears the industry is feeling they haven't been consulted fully. Is that correct? No? I appreciate that the financial impact on this of sprinkler systems is important, but I also feel that safety trumps the finances on this, and so I'm a little bit concerned, although I guess the other thing I would like to add is that I fully support having one building code for the province and not a bunch of scattered rules for each municipality. So I don't want to go that direction either, but I'm a little bit unclear on some of this, so I'll look for clarification. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman McLeod. Alderman Keating?
Thank you, Your Worship. When I discussed this before, I really understand the aspect of advocacy and going ahead and pushing forward the idea of doing this. On the other hand, is I like to have a strong background, and I believe that's what this does, is because when you put the seal of approval of council on it, it states that we endorse all of these things and we would like them changed. Without having a strong background on a number of those things, I think that's where I came from, and I need that background before I make a decision, so I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Keating. Any further discussion on these amendments? Alderman Colley-Urquhart to close.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to address some of my colleagues' debate. Alderman Hodges, I get the sense that you just feel that it takes a long time to get amendments made to the Provincial Act, and we've got to get on with it. And this in no way, Alderman Hodges, is meant to, slow the process down by bogging it down with more consultation. As GM Watson has stated, Calgary has provided a lot of leadership in this area over the past 10 years. It's important that we continue to speak with one voice, to advocate. There still are 3 or 4 significant policy areas that we have to keep pushing for. and based on sound research and a strong foundation of knowledge, which is what number 6 is getting at. Alderman Marr, we may not have the ultimate authority, but we can strongly influence the debate and the advocacy at a variety of levels. And I know that you're very interested in public consultation, and I think that was further underlined by Mr. Watson. I want to commend administration on our technical review obligations over the years, both nationally and provincially, that has helped move the ball down the field on a number of these issues. Alderman MacLeod, it's not the sense that industry doesn't feel consulted. They have been engaged in this matter for quite a long time, but there are still 4 pretty significant outstanding issues as they relate to mandatory sprinkler use. And I think the challenge is they want the City of Calgary to be seen to be speaking with one voice. And is it administration speaking, or is it a council policy that's speaking? And so I felt it was important enough from a public safety point of view to have council be definitive around what they believe in with this. Public safety, absolutely I agree, trumps finance. A lot of these huge residential fires, though, have been as the result of illegal grow-ups in our community and organized crime, and not just a single-family house catching on fire. So we always have to keep that, and that's referenced in the reports as well. But it's industry wants to continue to work in partnership with the City of Calgary and other stakeholders. So it's not as if they haven't been consulted. And Alderman Keating, I agree that advocacy is an important role, and I know that you're a fact finder and you like lots of information, and that's sort of what number 6 is getting at, that there's a ton of good work that's being done with the NRC and with the CFD around these matters. And what will happen is this will then come back through CPS for the public and for council to be well informed on this matter. Thank you. I hope you'll support this, council.
Thank you very much, Alderman Collier-Urquhart. So on the amendments, are we agreed? Any opposed? Alderman Hodges is opposed. Back then to the main motion. On the main motion, any further discussion? All right, then on the main motion as amended, oh, I noticed a little typo in it, Madam Clerk. Yeah, it should be tabled at the end of number 2. On the main motion then as amended, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right. That then takes us to item 7.1.1, City Manager's Reports, Report C-2011-04, Development Agreement Negotiations, Deferral Request. Can I have a mover, please? Thanks, Alderman Chabot. Seconded. Alderman Marr, thank you. And Alderman Keating.
When ready, I have a classroom to introduce. Could I have the 19 grade 3 students from Douglasdale School and their teacher, Mike McGowan, please stand? Thank you. And they will be joining us for a week, and their focus is how are they connected to the world. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for coming, and I think I get to spend some time with you tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. I've been bringing this up for some time. With the negotiated agreement, we treat it as if it is negotiation between the industry and City Hall, and yet the public who end up receiving the bill and end up paying for the long-term implications are not involved in the process in any way. I'm not suggesting that the public be involved in the negotiations, but there needs to be some sort of public participation on the implications of a levy, the pros and cons of them, and the long-term results. So I'm wondering if it wouldn't be appropriate to suggest an amendment that we establish a process for public input. The public are treated like interlopers in this, and yet they're frankly paying the bill. I think that has to stop.
Are you proposing the amendment, Alderman Farrell, or are you asking if it's
Well,
appropriate?
I'm asking
Maybe
Mr. Watson, we have a little bit more time to continue with the agreement. I know the public came out en masse at very short notice in the middle of summer, this summer. They would like to continue to be a part of this discussion because they understand the implications, even though we may not think they fully understand. I think they really do. So I'm wondering if, with this little bit of extra time, if we could somehow establish some sort of public process.
I can give you my answer if you like, Mr.
Well, I'll give you
Watson.
mine first, and I'll see if it has any.
See if they match.
See if they match or not. Although we have a bit more time, you're absolutely right. We're suggesting no later than April. Given the timing of getting reports done and then through our system and the Urban Development Institute, whom we are negotiating with, they have their own systems that they have to get through. It really means by about the middle of March, we have to have the reports done. If there is public input, and I'd have to do more thinking about what that would look like if that's what council wants, I would seriously suggest that we'll not be able to do that within the time frame. Public input, certainly, as I see it, Your Worship, to Alderman Farrell, is through the committee meeting. That'll be no later than April, which of course is a public meeting. We will certainly shape the report such that hopefully not only does it reflect the negotiations, but helps the public understand where we got to in the negotiations, and then of course then it becomes a matter of committee and then ultimately council to decide whether or not those are that's the input.
Well, and therein lies the problem, because when does the public get involved in this kind of thing? I suggest that that's not sufficient. I'm not suggesting they be at the table, but some mechanism to go out and explain the issue to the public when the next month we're going to be having a report that our utility is broke. I think that's a pretty serious implication. And so even going out to the FCC, going out to a civic camp meeting, communicating in some way the implications, long-term implications of these decisions, gives them the import that they're due. And so I've been asking this question for a decade, and I continue to be disappointed in the answers. But it is, so I think I'm going to suggest an amendment. I don't think this public input needs to be elaborate or laborious. It needs to be a mechanism of communicating the pros and cons of what we're doing. So I'm going to suggest establish a process for public input.
Okay, so you are suggesting an amendment. Let's just figure out the language here. Have you got it in your hand there, Alderman?
Simple. Establish a process for public input.
Okay, and direct to bring forward the item. So after the word April 20th, and establish a process for public input.
Does that imply that it comes after April 20th? I'm thinking between now and April.
Okay, so direct administration to establish a process for public input and bring forward the report.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
All right, do you have a seconder for that? Thanks, Alderman Colley-Urquhart. All right, so on the amendment, which is about public input into this process, I've got quite a long number of speakers list, so I'll just go through each of you and ask if you want to speak on the amendment. Alderman Colley-Urquhart on the amendment? Okay, I'll just leave the lights on. Alderman Hodges on the amendment?
Well, Your Worship, members of council, I never thought I'd be saying this. Members of council, Your Worship, it's difficult enough to get an agreement by mid-year in any given year with respect to the development agreement, standard development agreement, or even special development agreements. If you want to involve the public, that's another 5-6 months of delay in getting it done. We have policy committees policy committee reports are dealt with in public. If any public are interested, it can be advertised as an item on the agenda, which we don't do. Be advertised as an item on the agenda, and the public can attend and deal with it. Next thing I'm going to hear is that we want to have a public discussion on who likes Calgary Transit and who doesn't. This can go on forever. If people don't want to use Calgary Transit, they have a choice. Don't use it. Drive your car. Hop on your bike. The process of public consultation is important, and it's too important, in fact, to insert it into a process in this stage of negotiations with the industry and expect that any of these negotiations will conclude in a timely fashion, if in fact they ever conclude. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Alderman Hodges. Mr. Sawyer, maybe I can ask you a question, which is, given the large set of public consultations that we talked about in relation to the business planning and budget cycle process, do you imagine that this conversation around assessments and levies would also form part of that consultation?
Your Worship, I think potentially it could come up, but I wasn't thinking that the public consultation would get in a level of detail to this type of area. Now, that is subject of a meeting of council next Monday morning to provide the consultant some direction on the public engagement, so could be further discussed there. But that's my kind of thoughts.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Alderman MacLeod on the amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe Alderman Farrell could address this in her closing. What I heard was examples, not so much of consultation, but of informing public and making sure the public understand. It's a very complex issue, and I think that we do have some challenges in communicating the full cost of growth. But I'm also concerned that if we add a third player to what is essentially a two-party negotiation, that we may never get there. So I wonder if a communications exercise might actually help the situation considerably, but at the same time still bring the public into the process.
Thanks, Alderman MacLeod. Alderman Lowe on the amendment.
Well, Your Worship, Alderman Hodges and Alderman MacLeod said much of what my thought is, particularly at this stage in the negotiation. You know, it will come to committee. Those who are informed, who've taken the time to inform themselves, have the ability to come and speak to us at committee at that time. If there's a value in this concept, and I'm going to move it from these negotiations to the concept, I think it would be as we move into the next round of discussing how we finance growth. Good. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Any further discussion on this item? On the recommendations, then, are we agreed? Any opposed? Alderman Chabot is opposed. Carried. All right, so that takes us then to 742, PAC 2011-03, Governance Review. Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Can I have a seconder? Thanks, Alderman Pincott. So want to say anything about it, Alderman Lowe?
Just very briefly, Your Worship, we've separated governance from the bylaw review, and the idea being that essentially the governance piece will inform how our bylaw changes as we go ahead. You can see that we've identified the review committee by title so that it can have whatever life it requires. So I'd ask your support, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Alderman Hodges?
Does somebody have a copy of this, please?
It's just 2 pages at the very end of the giant little piece. Packet pages 319 through 321.
I've run across it here and there, but just a second.
It's not marked with a different color.
So what this, while you look for all this does is set up a task force made up of the members of PAC plus chair of the audit committee plus the chair of the procedure bylaw subcommittee to do some work around governance over the next few months.
Sure, thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? All right, then, on the recommendations, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right, that takes us then to the Procedure Bylaw Subcommittee, PBS 2011-02, excuse me. Alderman Keating.
Thank you, Your Worship. On that note, we are looking at governance review, and a number of the small amendments here may be reflected in changes, and I think at this time it may be wise just to table this until the governance is done, and then that way we can come in with a very substantial list of changes and discuss all the changes at one time and their implications to each other.
Okay, so we have a motion then to table this item pending the results of the Sorry, Alderman Lowe. So I was just saying that that's a non-debatable motion, which is somewhat ironical, given what's in the motion. But on the motion to table, are we agreed? Any opposed? We need to call the roll, please.
Alderman Jones?
Yes.
Alderman Keating?
Yes.
Alderman Lowe?
No.
Alderman MacLeod?
Yes.
Alderman Marr?
Yes.
Alderman Pincott?
No.
Alderman Pootmans?
Yes.
Alderman Stevenson?
No.
Alderman Carra?
Yes.
Alderman Chabot? Alderman Collyer-Urquhart?
No.
Alderman Demong?
Yes.
Alderman Farrell?
Yes.
Alderman Hodges?
Yes.
Mayor Nenshi?
Yes.
That's carried, Your Worship.
Thank you. All right, Alderman Marr, your light is on. Okay, thank you. That takes us then to notices of motion. So, notice of motion NM 2011-05, Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. This request was made by administration for me to bring this forward, which is an extension. There's a change in the amount, so if I could change that now, it's 26. It's the 26,666,668. It's actually the last number is a 6. I know that's kind of scary. So a $2 difference, but we want to be accurate. Just a little bit of explanation that many municipalities across Canada through FCM have indicated a challenge in completing their projects by the deadline, March 2011 deadline. The federal government's responded by extending the deadline for a project completion from March to October 31st, 2011. And the City of Calgary is requesting extension for 2 projects, the LRT traction power upgrades and the 7th Avenue rehabilitation for car stations and track work. So if there are any questions, perhaps they could be directed to administration.
Thanks, Alderman Farrell, and I heard Alderman Marr second this. So on this notice of motion, Alderman Chabot.
Thank you, Worship. Probably to administration. When they say project completion, what's the definition of completion? Is that awarding of a contract or the work actually being fully completed, or how do they define completion?
I believe it's last invoice paid, but Mr. Logan?
Your Worship, completion, with respect to the funding from the government, we only get, we're provided funding for work that is complete, physically complete. And so anything that would not be physically complete by October the 31st would not be eligible for cost sharing. So the project doesn't necessarily have to be 100% complete to receive any funding at all. Let's say we hadn't finished the landscaping or something, or painting or something like that. That wouldn't negate us from getting other funding.
But if some of the landscaping is complete, it still needs to be invoiced and then paid for before we can be reimbursed or credited for it? And how does that mechanism work?
Your Worship, I believe in the case of the federal funding, yes, we have to have been invoiced by an applicant, or sorry, by a contractor for the work that's been done.
before we would be eligible to get the matching money from the federal government.
So worst case scenario, we could ask people to give us interim invoices for projects that haven't been completely completed. Understand what I'm saying? Like if there's a whole bunch of work that has to be done, like a whole bunch of welding on a large piece of infrastructure, and we're 3/4 complete, ask them for an interim invoice for the work completed today.
Your Worship, that would be fairly typical on a contract. Both of these projects have multiple separate contracts, and we get monthly invoice progress invoices from them. So that would not pose any extraordinary problems.
But they'll both be done long in advance of October, right, Mr. Logan?
No, Your Worship.
Really?
I'm not going to stand here and tell you that. No.
Dang.
7th Avenue will certainly be. The City Hall station will be done well in advance of October. The West End station is going to be later in the year, Your Worship. And the traction power upgrades, this is only the first phase. They'll actually be going on for the next 3 years. So,
but the $30 million for the traction power upgrade, is that all meant to be work that's supposed to be completed this year?
Yes, Your Worship. That's specifically five substations that we're working on around the intercity area.
That's what I thought, because my understanding is that the federal government saw a number of these situations across the country, realized that because of the way they pay in arrears, although there's no new money for this infrastructure funding, they wanted to make sure people could complete the projects they were working on. So it's actually kind of nice of them to do. But I hope that we will be able to get all of, the total 36,666,666 in by the end of the year.
Your Worship, they did come to Calgary and visit for Council's information and looked at the projects that they are funding. They wanted to be assured that we were underway. They wanted to be assured that we had actually done some work that had been invoiced for. And the purpose of this motion, Your Worship, is to confirm the city's commitment to those projects.
Thanks, Mr. Logan. Sorry, Alderman Chabot, I took your spot there for a second.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm used to getting interrupted while I have the floor. Mr. Logan.
Sorry, what were you saying, Alderman Chabot?
So, Mr. Logan, you don't envision us having any difficulty in fulfilling this with this extension?
Your Worship, we have teams dedicated to making sure that we meet these objectives. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we're working hard at it.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Chabot. Alderman Hodges.
Just for a minute, Your Worship, I understand the urgency, Your Worship, and members of council of this resolution to get the federal government. Maybe, in fact, they've already agreed, but they need a formal request to extend the deadline. But through the chair, Mr. Logan, 7th Avenue, 4 stations, 80 million, that's 20 million apiece. Yep. But
Your Worship,
I'd just like to point out for comparison, Mr. Logan would be aware too, they talked about the new Crowfoot station that was completed about a year ago being expensive, and it was, I think, around 17 million. And that was an enclosed structure up at Crowfoot.
Your Worship, the 7th Avenue project is multiple platforms. There's actually five different phases. There's 2 platforms in the west, 2 platforms in the east, and a number of other smaller projects along the way. The ISF funding applies to 2 out of the 4 phases that are currently underway, so it is more than 2 stations, Your Worship. But yes, they are quite expensive.
Well, it indicates 4 car stations. So how many stations then? 2?
11, I believe we have 11 platforms.
But not on 7th Avenue, or do you?
Yes.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. Are any of these structure, which is probably a redundant question now, are any of these platforms going to be fully enclosed?
No, Your Worship. None of them will be fully enclosed. The platform that's closest to City Hall here will have canopies on both sides, but there will still be an open section down the middle of the 7th Avenue area.
That's quite a project. Thank you.
You've asked Alderman Hodges a question that I ask poor Mr. Logan every single time I meet him, I think. But I still don't understand why they take so long and why they're so expensive, but I understand there's a lot of wires. All right, then. Any further discussion on this item? All right, then. On the notice of motion, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right, then. That takes us to resignations and appointments for the 2011 Business Revitalization Zone for Montgomery.
I'll move that, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Hodges. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Any discussion on this item? Okay, on these recommendations, are we agreed? Agreed. Any opposed? Carried. Okay. There we go. We've got a bylaw tabulation now. Bylaw 60M 2010 on the CMLC.
Second and third readings, Your Worship.
Alderman Lowe?
Second and third readings, I'll move them.
Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Do I have a seconder for that? Thanks, Alderman Chabot. All right, then. On second reading of this bylaw, are we agreed? Any opposed?
Opposed.
Alderman Hodges is opposed. And on, we don't need authorization for third. So on third reading of this bylaw, are we agreed? Any opposed? Alderman Hodges is opposed. Carried. Thank you. All right. Urgent business then. LPT 2011-05, the GreenTRIP application proposal, revised. Alderman Chabot, are you moving this? Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Alderman Keating. Alderman Chabot, did you want to introduce?
Oops, wrong button. There was a significant debate at committee in regards to the GreenTRIP funding and what the allocation should or should not be, and then there was a proposed amendment that was put forward by Alderman Keating, specifically on the reallocation of these funds to different initiatives and different objectives. And part of the discussion, of course, was focused around the four-car system and the ability to provide cars specifically for the four-car system that will ultimately be concluded by the time the GreenTRIP funding is fully subscribed. And the motion that was originally put forward, administration had indicated that 20 cars would not provide us one additional four-car system. And it was subsequently amended to 30 LRVs to be able to accommodate at least 10 three-car systems to be upgraded to four-car systems. Also, part of what was discussed was that the intent of administration was to decommission 20 LRVs for the purpose of using some of the parts and components from those 20 LRVs to help to maintain some of our older and I guess deteriorating fleet. So short of providing direction on management, I think there's an opportunity for administration to make some amendments in regards to the rate of decommissioning of some of these LRVs to provide further enhancements to the four-car systems by maybe not decommissioning all 20 all at once, but rather decommissioning some in an on opportunity basis. It'll provide increased ridership, potentially increased revenue, and help to make the justification for further investments in LRVs into the future, and potentially when there's some additional GreenTRIP funding that does come forward. Anyways, the intent, of course, through these amendments is to increase the potential for providing a dedicated right-of-way BRT system into the southeast, high needs area, high growth area, and what was also identified through the discussions is that there's still significant amount of dollars in the Building Canada Fund that has yet to be expended on the southeast leg, dedicated for the southeast leg, which could help to further provide opportunities to fully implement the objectives of these amendments, primarily in regards to the southeast leg. So members of council, I hope you'll support the proposed amendments that are put forward. Applaud Alderman Keating for coming up with the majority of these recommendations, and also for looking out for a high growth area, high needs area, an area that is currently underserved by public transportation, and this would certainly help move us in that direction. So hope you'll support this and address any issues that I can in close.
Thanks, Alderman Chabot. Before we get into all of the debate on this item, I should bring Council a little bit more information, which is that I had another day of Council conversation with the Minister on the GreenTRIP proposal. I felt like I'd already had that conversation with him a couple of months ago. But I did speak with the Minister this morning. And I asked him specifically about how firm the deadline of January 31st is, and also if the provincial government would entertain any movement between categories within our proposal after the deadline has passed. So in other words, I said, let's say that our big categories are the purchase of LRVs, TOD planning, 17th Avenue Southeast, and the Southeast Transitway. Could we move the money around as the numbers get more firm? Because unfortunately the numbers are not very firm right now. He indicated that he would have no problem with that. He also suggested that there's a second phase deadline, a second deadline for the GreenTRIP funding. We could push the whole thing to the second deadline, but in reality what he told me is what we are concerned about is the split of the Calgary area monies between yourselves and your regional partners. And I told him that the Calgary Regional Partnership has already agreed that 20% will go to the regional partners and 80% will go to the city. That's correct, right, Alderman Stevenson? And that they are not particularly fussed about what projects the city uses for its 80%. Once he heard that, his expression was that beyond that, he's extremely flexible. He won't mess with the 80-20, but if we want to change what is within our ambit, we can do so. So that's just out there so that as we have this debate, you understand the background. Alderman Carra, did you have a...
Yeah, I had the opportunity to spend some time on the phone with members of transit who are struggling to reach a January 30th deadline, and we're working over the weekend. There seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between what the politicians are saying and what the administrators are saying with regards to the flexibility of that deadline. And I guess at the end of the day, we'll take it from the minister, not from the staff, but just want to put that on the table.
I would not be surprised if I get another update over lunch hour, because I know the minister is meeting with his staff. But he did strongly suggest that our Mr. Logan and Mr. Wong sit down with his ADM as soon as possible to discuss some of the details around that. Cart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for trying to contact the minister this morning before the discussion. Well, I, although not on the committee, was able to stay for I think about 6 or 7 hours, but I don't know how late you all went that night. Please, Council, accept what I've circulated to you as an effort to be helpful. I found the way the recommendations of committee are coming forward were a little bit confusing. They were a little rambling. There was stuff in there that really should have been in the report that wasn't necessarily a recommendation. So I would like to place these amendments, Your Worship, to the report that's up there. Madam Clerk, if you could put those up there. Absolutely a lot of similarity, but I've made it clear to you and over the weekend that I'm certainly biased to 4-car trains and the investment that we've made into the refurbishment of platforms downtown. So I think we're all striving to do our best on this matter. So I have extra copies here, Your Worship. I put some on your desk. When I got your email, Your Worship, this morning at 1:30, I think I sent mine to you at midnight, so you'd have a heads up. So anyway, the first one is, let's not forget, Council, that this item is about Phase 1 of the GreenTRIP application proposal. It's only Phase 1. So to include in the recommendations before us, number 4, for example, that Alderman Chabot put, number 4 on future disbursements, shouldn't even be part of this discussion in my view. It's not before us. It'll come at a later date. It could be a notice of motion. It could be something. But we're talking about Phase 1. So the first one would be to file the recommendations in 69, which we're all probably in agreement, to receive report LPT 2011-05, including the attachments of 1 and 2 for information. And as Alderman Keating had outlined, and I just tried to streamline it a bit, submit a GreenTRIP application Phase 1 in support of the purchase of the 50 LRVs, which is different than committee. I appreciate it. The Southeast LRT BRT Transitway, the 17th Avenue Southeast BRT, and the TOD land use. So that's the construct of how we want Phase 1 to proceed. And then number 4 is to structure the application for Phase 1 GreenTRIP funds in the following manner based on Calgary's ability to dedicate matching funds. And it's pretty consistent with what Alderman Keating and the committee outlined. So I won't go through each of the other thing, members of council that are new. For reference purposes, it's easier giving things a 4A, B, and a C rather than a bullet for easy reference when you're debating things. So that's another reason why I tried to clean it up. And then in conversation with Mr. Wong and Mr. McKendrick over the weekend, to try to deal with this issue of our ongoing commitment to 4-car trains, because it's the members of the public think that we're departing from that, and I don't believe that was anyone's intention. No. So number 5 says, direct administration to further council's commitment to 4-car trains by preparing a report outlining a detailed plan to identify the number of LRVs needed to run a reliable 4-car train system in the South LRT line. But I'm hearing now that it's not just the South line. We want to, so we could remove the word South as I present these, Madam Clerk. That would be on LRT lines as soon as practically possible. We need to have that information. Number 6, direct administration to provide a report as soon as practically possible outlining the optimal life cycle refurbishment and replacement requirements for all existing LRVs to ensure the system is reliable. So from the debate at committee, some people were of the view that, well, we're not, it's nice to be getting into all of these new things, but what about the commitment of life cycle refurbishment and maintaining an excellent, reliable system? And number 7 is pretty standard, that this is coming before us today as a matter of urgent business, and that prior to being forwarded to council, the city clerk will amend the title of the GreenTRIP application. I guess I would add now Phase 1, which is already done. So, Your Worship, that's the spirit in which I am submitting these. I was just trying to clean it up a little bit. If I have a seconder, I would appreciate it.
Alderman Farrell has seconded. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Your Worship, I was going to ask a question on procedure here, because over the week,
I might even have an answer.
You might even have an answer. Over the weekend, and at committee, I voted against what's here because I was having some difficulty with the complexity of the motion that was coming to council and understanding it in relation to the GreenTRIP program. Like Alderman Colley-Urquhart, I also have an interest in 4-car trains. But as I tried to work my way through this over the weekend and in conversation with Alderman Keating, everything I came up with was contrary. So I guess, and I'm sorry, Alderman Colley-Urquhart, but my first question, is this in fact contrary, and do we need in fact to defeat what committee did and start again?
I was waiting for a seconder to put this on the table so that I could make a ruling on that exact matter, because as Alderman Colley-Urquhart points out, it does two things. It does clean it up, but it also significantly reallocates the funding. So I thus suppose my practice on determining whether things are contrary is actually to ask the mover and seconder if they feel that it's contrary. And the mover and seconder in this case, Alderman Chabot and Alderman Keating. Sirs? Contrary. Alderman Keating? Okay, so I will rule that this amendment is out of order because it is contrary to the initial intent. If we defeat this motion, then I will recognize Alderman Colley-Urquhart to bring this up as a motion arising from the defeat.
Motion arising.
We can't do that.
No. It'll be the counter motion. Defeat what we have, then Alderman Colley-Urquhart could put this as a counter motion.
Exactly.
All right. So rather than standing here and debating on a point of procedure, I will say I agree wholeheartedly with you, sir.
Someone write that down.
Your Worship, Your Worship, also on a point of procedure.
Yes.
Although I do find parts of this as contrary, I don't believe the entire motion that's put forward, it is very comprehensive in essence. There are aspects of it that are contrary, such as the change of the number of LRVs that are to be purchased, being as there's significant funding allocations that this would amend. If you change that portion of it, I see that aspect of it as contrary. So there are other aspects of it that are certainly beneficial and would certainly clean up the language, but the reallocation of those funds and dedicating them specifically on the number of LRVs and those referenced there too, I believe are contrary.
So perhaps what we can do, Alderman Chabot, is we can start the debate on this, and I'll ask you and your seatmate to see if you can come up with a series of amendments that would be in order, and we can look at those as well.
So, Your Worship, on a point of procedure, what we're hearing now is that the amendments that I placed are really not all contrary.
Correct.
So, respectfully, I would like to identify specifically in the amendments that Alderman Farrell and I have placed, which ones are contrary, and dismiss those then.
Yeah, and that's what I was suggesting. Perhaps you can, since Alderman Chabot is the mover of the original motion and he's sitting next to you, you can go through and determine with him the ones that he has no objection to, and then I'll recognize you again and you can place them.
Okay, I'll take them out for lunch. Thank you.
All right. Oh, come on, we'll be done by then. Alderman Colley-Urquhart, 7 minutes. We should be able to pass the whole thing. Alderman Farrell.
There we go. Thank you. Well, this was interesting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the LPT and was very surprised at the outcome of the meeting. When you think of $225 million and no ability for administration to really analyze what the impacts are of a very significant change to direction. So I'm going to ask some advice from the mayor. Do you think we should be making decisions of this magnitude without some sort of follow-up report from administration on what the impacts are to the funding, to the direction? I mean, for one thing, as somebody who's undertaken more TOD projects in Ward 7 than any other parts of the city, we've made promises to the residents of those TOD communities that we would be building and servicing four-car stations. So having four-car stations, the asset without the ability to alleviate the congestion really is like buying a car without any wheels. So I need to know what the impacts of those are. How much is the total leg of the LRT in the southeast, which I think everyone wants to go on, but how many riders do we anticipate? Is that the best use of funds for that? What's the total cost? Will we have the money to finally get us there? What's the big plan for getting us there? I don't have the answers to those questions. So I think it's kind of reckless to go forward with allocating this funding, even though we may think we have a better idea, and I'm not suggesting that we don't or that members of council don't, but to do this kind of change in absence of some critique of it seems reckless.
Are you really asking me to comment on that, Alderman Farrell?
I am asking.
That should take us to lunchtime. All right. I agree with everything you said, Alderman Farrell. The challenge that I have is that the recommendation originally put to council was equally lacking rationale. And this is the challenge that I have. In November, we had a report come to us that was not grounded, in my opinion, either in council's previous direction, because council's previous direction on this was build us the Southeast LRT with this money. And we got a report back that didn't do that. And in particular, did not, to me, feel grounded in the objectives and the overall priorities and strategy for Calgary Transit as a whole. And so I negotiated with the minister an extension to the deadline, and I went back last night and watched the video of the meeting. to see, geez, was council being unclear on this? But they weren't. A number of members of council, including myself, stood up and suggested what we needed from Calgary Transit was precisely the questions that you're asking. What are the overall priorities? How does this funding link into the overall priorities? What order should we be doing these things in? And what is the rationale behind these recommendations? What we got back was essentially the same report we had in November, with a few pages added to the end. So I kind of wish you had been at that meeting. I wasn't there the whole time, but I listened to a bunch of it, and I was there for a big chunk of it, because your colleagues continually ask the questions that you have without real answers. So, for example, you know, the TODs in Ward 7 are on the northwest-south line. There has been no forward motion on expanding those platforms to 4 cars. We're still working on the northeast.
No, actually, I've got a plan on my desk for several of the north.
But there's no budget, right? So this is the challenge, because, you know, and on the other item, which came to LPT from Transit, which was the BRT network route, that one was actually sent back for the same reasons, right?
Your Worship, on a point of procedure, respectfully, this was a notice of motion from Alderman Hawksworth asking very specifically about the southeast LRT extension. Not all these other things you're asking for. That isn't what the direction of council was around this notice of motion.
Except that in November, when council referred this back, they referred it back asking for more information on all of this in order to make the GreenTRIP application. I mean, procedurally, that's not the drama that I have here. The drama I have here is that council was being asked to spend $200 million on these 50 light rail vehicles with the flimsiest of rationale.
Well, I respectfully disagree with that. So,
well, I was asked for my opinion, so I'm giving it.
Oh, no, I'm asking your opinion on, is this the most rational way to spend $250 million? I would suggest it's not. I'm not saying that the recommendations here are the wrong ones. I, frankly, have no idea.
Well,
I didn't, over the weekend, become a transit planner. I have some sort of visceral ideas of what works for transit as a regular transit user, but I think we don't have the correct information. So I've got a number of questions.
So, I mean, I guess my point is that I agree with you. We don't have the information to make the decision at all. But the problem is we've got this deadline. So how do we negotiate that?
Can we, then I think that all these, if council hasn't been able to access the correct information for the questions that they have been asking, and we're getting the same reports repeated back to us, then we need to ask administration to be thoughtful in their approach and bring us back the information. I mean, I've been hearing that 50 cars is the magic number to get competitive bids. That's fairly serious implication. So can we get an extension? I highly doubt that the minister would be that firm that they wouldn't grant it. Yeah, Calgary has a pretty good reputation of building transit. So can we ask for this information to be analyzed by our administration, provide us their best recommendations? Of course, then council can make the decision that we choose that we see fit, and then make an informed decision, because I don't feel today I can.
So that's council's decision, and I imagine that'll be an excellent discussion for the lunch table.
Okay.
However, I, as I said, did speak with the minister today, and I believe that there are options to buy ourselves some more time. I just want to make sure that we don't end up in this exact same situation 2, 3, 5, 6 weeks from now, given that in November we were attempting to buy ourselves more time for this analysis.
I think we have their attention. So after the break then, I will make a referral motion to analyze this information and get a...
You'll still have the floor after the break then, Alderman.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. We're recessed till 1:15.
Alderman Carroll.
Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. So I've heard that there's been some movement over the lunch hour, and I'm prepared to put something forward if...
It's not quite here yet, Alderman Farrell. I did have the opportunity to chat with some members of council over the lunch hour, as well as meet with Mr. Wong and Mr. Logan on this issue. And I believe that one way out of this situation we find ourselves in is to actually today approve the application for the GreenTRIP funding to be allocated towards the following projects: purchase of light rail vehicles, Southeast LRT pre-design, 305 improvements, TOD planning, and the Southeast Transitway, which are the same as the 5 in the current report, but without actually any numbers on them. That will give administration the time to give us some of the answers we need, particularly around the Transitway, and council then can allocate the funds amongst those 5 projects as it sees fit.
So perhaps I could suggest then, and I don't think that this is contrary, is that if I made the amendments to simplify down to those elements, then that doesn't preclude the detail from our council members at committee injecting those numbers in later, but it doesn't, there's a possibility that it could change in the future.
I would be fine.
Fine-tuned.
I would be fine with that, and I imagine that Alderman Chabot and Alderman Keating would be fine with that as well.
Okay. And I want to thank those members of council who put the energy into providing such detail in the report. I just at this time could not support it with that detail without some sort of feedback from our hired experts. So I'll make that amendment then if
Okay,
you
so
will accept
perhaps what
it.
we could do, Madam Clerk, is let's put, I hate doing this in real time. Yeah, why don't we put Alderman Collier-Cart's amendment back up on the screen? Because you don't have the new one, I don't think, yet, do you? So we'll just do it in real time.
So we'll put Alderman Collier-Cart's up and then delete the specifics.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So to start with in number 1, just one small administrative thing. It says to file 2010-69.
That's
Okay. Sorry, I know these are being typed as we speak, but so as not to waste council's time. So file 2010-69. We should also file, just to be safe, LPT 2010-58. Okay. And then number 2 is fine. And then number 3, just remove the word 50 next to LRVs. Okay. No, I think that's fine then. And then...
and number 4 to remove that.
And just get rid of number 4 completely. Yeah. Just delete the whole thing. And I don't mind leaving number 5 in. Let's leave it in. And just get rid of the word south in front of LRT. 4-car train on the LRT lines. Okay. And then that needs to become number 4. Number 5. Let's get rid of that one, because that has nothing to do with GreenTRIP. We can do that one as a motion arising. And then that becomes 5.
I would say the date is premature. The 24th is too.
That's today. That's already happened. So we can take those off.
So any date? No.
No, I don't think we need one, because I just don't know what the province is going to say.
Can we actually move the LRVs below the Southeast LRT? Seriously.
I think that would be fine, Alderman Carras. So renumber A and B. Exactly. Sorry for doing this in real time, Council, but will still probably be done before it comes back to us from my office. So, okay. So Alderman Farrell, is this what you're proposing as an amendment?
Precisely. Thank you for the assistance.
Alderman Chabot, Alderman Keating, you're okay with this as it not being contrary? Thanks, Alderman Chabot. Alderman Keating?
Extremely reluctantly.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so now we've got this amendment on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Alderman Pincott. Well, this is the whole point, is we've taken the numbers out so that once we get real numbers around what is now number A, then we can know how much we've got for what is now number B.
And is this for phase one of the GreenTRIP, or is
This is for phase one. This is only for phase one.
Is that clear in the motion?
Why don't we add that under number 3 there, support a phase one GreenTRIP application.
That would be fine.
Number 3, yeah. No, just at the top where it says submit a GreenTRIP application, just add phase one before the word greed. Do you love this part?
Very disturbing.
No. Okay. Or should we add the total is what you're asking? Yes, why don't we do that? Is it 225.6, is that right?
Let's ask Mac that question.
Mr. Logan, what's the right number for the total amount of the application?
Excuse me, Your Worship. I may know. I think it's 150.4 from the province and 75.2 from the city.
Mr. Logan?
Those numbers sound right, but I'm just going to find the spot in the report that I can point to.
Well, I'm just looking at the original motion, and the total is 225.6.
225.6 is on page 3 of 6, right-hand column, halfway down.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's
okay. So
Mr. Stevenson's helped me by pointing out that on page 204 in the top paragraph, which is attachment 1, concurs 150.4, and the 75.2 contribution
okay.
from the
So just say this then. Sorry, Alderman Farrell. I'm sure you'll be okay with this, right? After the bracket, so 225.6 bracket, 150.4. Of provincial funding. Okay? All right. So on the amendment then, Alderman Keating.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a number of things to say prior to this, and I won't go into them in detail. That's because I can't find my little notes. There we go. I just wanted to point out right from the very beginning that the issue was going back to it's in the details where we're looking at. And unfortunately, again, we were missing the details that really made this move forward. And it was commented earlier today that we have made promises to the four-car trains. I stated at the other committee that we have made promises to the Southeast Transit as well in the past. And I just want to repeat some of those to understand why we're going down this route. But we made promises to the Southeast before the West LRT. We made promises to the Southeast before the expansion of both the Northeast and the Northwest, and we made promises to the Southeast before we decided to go down the four-car train. And so when are those promises or those suggestions going to be fulfilled? And that was the intent of all of this, because after a 2-month discussion, we were still missing a number of the details. And I could go into some dramatics here, but I did pull off a sheet of 9 reports, talks about the Southeast Mass Transit Corridor Study going back to '87 and continually going down, which I understand is a matter of course. But again, when it usually is at the top of the list, and for 5 consecutive projects it gets bumped down, you kind of begin to ask why and where are we going and when are we actually going to make it the top of the list. And I could hold out many of the 9 specific studies that were done along our way. So I guess the decision or the stand had to be made. When are we going to specifically work towards that end? And are we going to continually let it queue jumping go ahead and the southeast is left out in the area? I originally had some difficulty, and I understand, as I have always said, I'm here for the southeast and my ward, but I'm also here for the city. And so I had some difficulty with this at the beginning, and I would have certainly preferred definite numbers, but at this point I will support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Keating. On the amendment, Alderman Marr.
At this time, I would like to propose an amendment to the amendment. And it's just, well, not necessarily about the LRVs per se, but there's one little problem I have with number 4, and it's direct administration to further council's commitment. It's true that council has made a commitment to transit. It's true that we promised 4-car trains to everyone. And what I'd like to see is that instead of further council's commitment, I want the word reaffirm, because we know that these are all promises that we made. We went through a plan. We have consistently been telling our administration this is the direction that we need to head. We all believe that transit is important. We all believe that this is a way that we can increase mobility, reduce our environmental impact, as well as allow us to have less congestion on our roads. So what I would like to see is the word reaffirm, because that indicates that this is council policy. We are continuing with that policy. I think reaffirm is a stronger word, but
Come on,
you think
guys.
it's strong?
There's only 24 hours in the day.
Well,
Come on, let's go. That's your amendment, I'll second it.
Second. Thank you. That is my amendment.
Any further discussion on this earth-shattering amendments?
It's strong.
Are we agreed? On reaffirm versus further? To change the word further to the word reaffirm, are we agreed? Any opposed? Oh, you're kidding. All right. I got 3. Call the roll.
Alderman Stevenson.
No.
Alderman Carra.
Sure.
Alderman Chabot.
No.
Alderman Colliercott.
No.
Alderman Demong.
No.
Alderman Farrell.
Sure, yes.
Alderman Hodges.
Yes.
Alderman Jones.
No.
Alderman Keating.
If he likes it.
Is that
I think
4,
that's a
Your
yes.
Worship? Alderman Lowe.
Yes.
Alderman McLeod.
Yes.
Alderman Marr.
Yes.
Alderman Pincott.
No.
Alderman Putmans.
Yes.
Mayor Nenshi.
No.
It's carried, Your Worship.
An 8-7 vote, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for that incredibly important contribution, Alderman Marr. Alderman Carra, on the amendment now.
Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm going to get back to point 4 because I'm not sure why we have point 4 in there. I don't see how that pertains to the GreenTRIP fund, and I just want to. I'll get back there. There's a couple things I want to say.
I can try to answer that too.
Okay, I would like that answered, and if it remains in, I'd like to address some things that it should also address potentially. I didn't come out of LPT totally jazzed that we had nailed it, but what I was supportive of in supporting the original motion coming before council from LPT was that we had made a substantive change in direction. And I think that I'm going to be a broken record on this until I think until I'm convinced that you guys understand what I'm saying and either agree or disagree. We talk about transit paying for itself. We talk about the city that we're building being a diseconomy of scale, existing at a diseconomy of scale. The more we grow, the deeper we dig ourselves into a hole. A transit-oriented city actually operates on an economy of scale, where the more you build, the more you can pay for it, the more you and the more you can supply. And that's the whole idea behind transit-oriented development. You can never get transit to pay for itself through ridership alone. But if you do the total cost accounting of the land use that transit should provoke around the station areas, you actually have more tax-paying infrastructure. You actually have more tax-paying structure than you have the infrastructure that tax-paying structure has to support. The automobile-scaled city is increasingly being shown through quantitative study after quantitative study to be the opposite end. So, we have to understand that it's not just supplying transit and getting it packed with riders. It's supplying transit that's surrounded by land uses that can actually support it. Now, transit made it clear through Q&A at debate and LPT that they are obsessively focused on our current measure of success for transit, which is decoupled, unfortunately, from building a city that operates at the kind of economies of scale that we have to move to, which is to say a city of transit-oriented development, which is exactly what the MDP and everything asked for. As a matter of fact, transit mentioned TOD like twice in the 7 hours, and it was at prompting from me. So their focus is not how do we provide transit that is embedded in transit-oriented development. What they're currently focused on is how do we provide transit that continues to be incredibly successful according to the measurements that we use right now to rate success. And what we're rating for success is we've got a city that has an unbelievably centralized downtown that we cannot stuff enough cars into to get downtown, so more and more people have to take transit to get to their jobs downtown, and that's how we measure success. And my concern, coming full circle, I also want to say that I'm flabbergasted. Yeah, I'll come full circle to point 4. I'm flabbergasted that we've been spending $200 million on building 4-car stations without a plan in place to have a 4-car fleet, and that we were looking for a one-off spending. I look at transit cars as sort of a depreciating asset, and I'm not convinced that transit cars meet the terms of the GreenTRIP fund, which is a one-time transit funding mechanism specifically intended to get more and more people in Calgary out of their cars and to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And my concern is the way we approach transit right now is the same way you'd approach building another lane on the Deerfoot to relieve congestion, to act as a safety valve. And the way we're currently doing transit planning is we're preying on the inability to stuff cars downtown rather than provide an alternative means for Calgarians to live. And so I'm not convinced that putting 4-car trains on won't just promote more people to live further and further out and actually compound the problem the same way adding more lanes does. And so if we're going to direct administration to reaffirm council's commitment to 4-car trains, which I'm totally in support of, I'm just not convinced it fits the terms of the GreenTRIP fund. Well, you can say sure it does, but I just made a point that I don't think we've even addressed, and I would love to see the report from administration come back and address that, because I know in the months from November till today, I certainly raised that point with transit, and we got nothing back in the report. So I'm happy to support this amendment. I'm happy to get the numbers right as we move forward, but I want to make sure that we're actually asking the right questions and actually studying this. And I need answers to those questions, because I'm not convinced that 4 cars even fits the point of the GreenTRIP fund.
So I think, I hear what you're saying, Alderman Carra, and I think that the purpose of Alderman Farrell's amendment is really to give us time to think about the allocation between those 4 items, specifically to answer some of the questions you're asking. Right, and I have little doubt that you will ensure that they get answered as these reports start to come back. Alderman Putmans.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add a note, perhaps from a Ward 6 perspective, beneficiary of the West LRT and the four-car platforms. I am very grateful in particular to Alderman Keating, who has, I think, very graciously conceded that that there is a commitment to the four-car stations, and I think really has put a little water in his wine on this issue, and I just wanted to recognize that and thank you. I think that in the long run I will commit to working with you to ensure that the sentiment of the discussions at LPT are respected, and that we do ensure that as funding becomes available, that the South LRT becomes a reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Putmans. Alderman Lowe?
Your Worship, I support this. It's amazingly close to what I was trying to put together at committee. Keep it simple. My choices were buy the cars, build a guideway. Keep it simple. That's, I think, where we were trying to get, and I see it's there. The one thing that I have a little nagging concern about, and I spoke very, very briefly with Alderman Stevenson about it, is that the division of the GreenTRIP funding is an arrangement between ourselves and the Calgary Partnership. And somehow I want to recognize that here so that the partnership clearly understands that we're maintaining our regional perspective on this matter. I think it's important as we go ahead that we never lose sight of that perspective. Unlike Alderman Marr, I can't find the language to put it in here, Your Worship, but somewhere in here I think we have to acknowledge that piece.
I think I can, so Alderman Lowe, I can certainly take an undertaking to communicate with the regional partnership on the decision that we've made. The way that it's embedded in here, it's a bit weird, right? But the way it's embedded in here is actually in the number.
I know.
Because that number represents 80% of the total for Calgary, the other 20% to be given to the region.
Yeah, but if I recall it, and I'm recalling from memory because I have no paper in front of me, and this is my question of Alderman Stevenson, and between the two of us we couldn't drag it up, was there a specific undertaking between the city and the partnership with respect to this?
I can actually answer that. Mm-hmm. So, because I did have, in November when this first came to council, I had a number of conversations with the members of the Calgary Regional Partnership Transition Committee on this very topic. Mm-hmm. And their perspective was that as long as we are not reaching out into their 20%, then anything we do on transit with our 80% will help them in the end.
Okay.
And so they didn't think that it was their place to talk to us about that. And in fact, in the capital region, if I'm not mistaken, all of the money is going to Edmonton because the regional partners said, whatever you do to improve your system helps us.
Yeah, and they will do up there what they will do down. I'm more focused on what we're doing down here. I just didn't want to erode any degree of confidence between ourselves and the partnership.
I don't think there's any fear of that, Alderman Lowe.
Okay. And, I listened with a great deal of interest over lunch and just now to Alderman Carra's observations. And, to be effective, transit, of course, has to be assured, reasonable, safe, and you have to be able to get on it. And you need to have a bus to get to it. And that's how you get cars off the road. So while I have some sense of where he's going, I'm a long way from being there yet. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Alderman Lowe. Alderman Demong?
Just because I don't want to be left off on the amendment bandwagon, I'd like to make a second amendment to the amendment.
I'm ready.
Can't make an amendment to an amendment.
Well, he already made an amendment to the amendment.
It's already passed, so we're in the main amendment
No,
now.
this is the amended document.
Okay, go ahead.
You're good. I'd like to add a Section 5, direct administration to reaffirm Council's commitment to Southeast LRT by way of preparing a report detailing a plan of action to move forward on a Southeast Transitway that would be the precursor to a true Southeast LRT.
Okay, so you're just adding some. So you're just adding some specificity on what administration has to do on that note. So
specifically saying we need something. I mean, we're saying that we've got some dollars to be moved towards a Southeast Transitway, but we have no transitway as such designed. So I'd like to see some movement towards that direction as to what would be that entail and what would be the costs involved. Now, I realize that's a huge report, but I'd like to see some progress towards it.
I think council is saying they want that, which is why we're not allocating the funds now. So no, I think that makes tons of sense. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Alderman Chabot. Oh, no, you can't. Alderman Hodges, thank you. Yeah, you can't because you seconded the main motion. So, all right, thanks, Alderman Hodges. Any discussion on this item? Yes, Alderman Carra?
Same way we moved A to B and B to A, I'd like to move 4 to 5 and 5 to 4 for the same reasons.
You can't amend an amendment to an amendment.
You can't? No. Well, we did it with A and B and B and A.
That was because it was the first amendment. We're now at the third level down.
It's kind of friendly, though.
If you were really, really, really nice to Alderman Demong and Alderman Hodges, and they said, "Oh, I meant to say 4, not 5," then that would be okay. All right, then. You did, in fact, say 4, actually. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for catching that, Alderman Carra. All right, so any further discussion on this sub-amendment, then? Yes, Alderman Chabot, then Alderman Colley-Urquhart.
Well, part of the argument in regards to whether or not the further amendment that had been put on the motion that Alderman Farrell put on there in regards to the reaffirmation of council's commitment to the southeast or to the 4-car train, I think this is another way of putting belts and braces around the southeast LRT, which was part of the motion that council had approved in regards to making applications for GreenTRIP, which was dedicated and focused around southeast LRT. So I think this is a good way of reemphasizing council's previous decision in regards to looking at providing a transit way for southeast LRT. So I will be supporting this amendment.
Thanks, Alderman Chabot. On the sub-amendment, Alderman Colley-Urquhart.
Thank you. Mr. Logan, you've been silent on this whole debate, so I'm going to give you a chance to comment. I got a whole bunch of questions for you when we get by this. What does this mean? I don't know what it means. There's no time on it. I don't know the amount of work that would be in something like this. Can you convey to me what your understanding is of this?
Mr. Logan?
Your Worship, my interpretation of Alderman Demong's amendment would be to expand upon Council's direction to do the pre-design study, to design the ultimate, which we have done some preliminary work on that in the past, which is outlined in our report, and then back into it, and how would we phase that in? And specifically, how would we go about creating a busway, if you will, or a transit way, rather than a full-on LRT right from day one? With respect to time and cost, I think we'd identified an overall cost on the detailed design study at about $10 million, and I think that this could be incorporated within that. This doesn't give me any cause for concern.
Okay, and as to time?
This is a fairly significant undertaking, Your Worship.
Should we refer this for you to come? Because it's not really related to the application.
Right now, Your Worship, it isn't as to time at the moment. I think it's at the earliest possible.
Earliest possible opportunity is what it said before.
Your Worship, it's probably somewhere in the 12 to 18 months to do a detailed design and phasing report, financing, and all that kind of undertaking. And we have, as you know, we have a fairly significant capital prioritization report coming forward to you within the next 6 months.
Right. So tell you what, Mr. Logan, I think that the language in the previous one, number 4, which says as early as possible, probably gives you a little bit of wiggle room. Though I would like to see an undertaking to LPT sometime soon about the timelines on that.
Your Worship, I appreciate that. I hate to be that vague. I would rather.
No, it's okay, and I don't want to force a date on you, given some of the issues we've had with that. But maybe what we can do is keep the as early as possible, but then you can, in a regular report to LPT, give them some real timelines once you've had some time to think about it.
Your Worship, would, if I might suggest, to expand upon your expansion upon Alderman Colley-Urquhart's question, maybe we could provide that timeline at the March LPT.
That'd be all right with you, Alderman Colley?
Should be given.
Should we add it to the?
I don't, is this an amendment to the amendment?
Yeah, we can't really
So
add
I
it now.
can't do it.
You know what we can do is when we get back to the main amendment.
Maybe Alderman DeMong said it originally, and I just didn't hear it.
Did I not say get back to us in March LPT?
Scoping.
He's out of order.
Yeah, that's
No, tell you what. Let's. I can get away with it if it's one word. But tell you what. Let's go ahead and dispense with this amendment one way or the other, and then let's put in a new. Let's have an amendment
Okay.
for a new number 6 that says timelines on the above will be presented to the March LPT.
right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Logan. I have a bunch of other questions for you once we get by the amendment. I don't think it's appropriate now. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alderman Collier-Card. On the sub-amendment, Alderman Farrell? Okay. All right, then. So anyone else on this amendment to the amendment? All right. On this, then, are we agreed? Any opposed? All right, carried. So Alderman Collier-Card, do you want to put a new number 6? Well, why don't we put in a new number 6 because it applies to the 4-car trains and to the Southeast Transitway?
So it would say that administration report back
To the, do you know what the
to
date
the
is,
SPC on
Alderman
LPT no later than
Yeah, do we know what the
March
actual date is?
I don't.
16th March 2011,
16th.
okay.
with timelines on the above.
Yeah, with timelines on the above. Thank you.
Okay.
10 words. That's
So do I
good.
have a seconder for that?
I'll second
Thanks, Alderman Carra. I'm sure there's no discussion on that, right? So on this amendment to the amendment, are we agreed? Okay, back to the main amendment then. Alderman Collier-Card.
So, Mr. Logan, there have been a number of things, comments that have been made, perhaps in your absence, but that I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to. Maybe I can just read a few of them. And these comments were made at committee and outside of committee. That Transit was asked to provide information in December, didn't come back with anything. That there's a vacuum of information. That there was no real costing of what the Transitway would cost, and that Transit was unable to come up with any thoughtful numbers or thoughtful options. That the actual numbers are fuzzy, and I wish they were less fuzzy. Ideally, they're half-baked, basically, was the essence of this, and that it was surprising that the city was planning stations for 4-car LRTs without having any 4 LRT trains. Maybe there's others that I want you to respond to, but could you respond to those comments?
Your Worship, thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to sip water. I think it's. I think there was a tremendous amount of information when you look at the Southeast LRT. There is a lot of history on the Southeast LRT and how we got to the plan that we have today, and that was outlined in the LPT report that was presented at committee, which hopefully outlines that over the last decade there's been a considerable amount of work to detail the alignment, the station locations, the adjoining land use, and we have done preliminary work to try to put a cost to that, and the cost that we've put to it has been in excess of $2 billion. And I think that that information might have been lost, that it isn't a matter of whether we think it should be in GreenTRIP, it's a matter of whether we're prepared to make that recommendation knowing that we can't afford the whole matter. How we phase it in and how much Transitway costs, yes, I think it's fair that we have not done that costing. We came back in January. We also brought forward the BRT reports by 2 months to try to give Council a bigger picture of where we're going with BRT, so we did rush a bit of our work to get the information to Council. Maybe we did so at the cost of some of the detail. But with respect to Alderman Carra's comment about the 4-car, I mean, the previous Council made a very distinct decision that we were going to go 4-car, and there was a number of things that were funded to that respect. The downtown LRT corridor was funded. The northwest and south line 4-car platform extensions were funded, and the northeast were expanding through station refurbishment budget, which council also approved. So we are upgrading the entire system, including building the west line and all the new stations 4-car day one. So that was done. Now, you may recall that in the capital budget plan, there is a line for LRT purchases. And so we have been expanding the fleet over the last number of years to work towards that 4-car fleet. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the funding that we would have liked to get the fleet to the number that we're at. But with respect to, we're fairly close, and the 50 number was debated, I heard that. 50 is really a reflection of virtually what it would take to do today, a 4-car train versus a 3-car train. It is not a fuzzy number. It's a pretty, it's within a couple of cars of a pretty firm number. So I think there has been a considerable amount of effort put into those. Maybe that's not reflected in detail in this report, but I can assure you that we do know where those numbers come from.
Right. So, no, that's helpful. As a member of council for nearly 11 years, I'm aware of the magnitude of work behind this, but would it be possible for Calgary Transit and yourself to provide an in-depth briefing on all the work that has been done and all the background work?
Not a problem. We would, I think we'd welcome the opportunity there. As the mayor reminded me today at our lunch meeting, what administration needs to take away from this is a very, very firm commitment to public transit by council, and a very rich debate on that, and maybe those briefings would be valuable.
So some of the other comments that were made that the Calgary Transit seems to have a multitude of long-term plans, and that you get the feeling that they never plan to build any of these things. I'd like you to comment on that, and I'd like you to comment on who actually sets the priority list and the tips list.
Well, we do rethink some of our plans, and some of the plans that we do not get built. And I think that's a good thing, Your Worship, because I think that sometimes things change and we need to come up with a better plan. So that may be viewed by some as not building what we say we're going to build. However, you can trace back our LRT system to the first Calgary Transportation Plan of 1967. The South Line, the Northwest Line, the Northeast Line are all in that document, which was written 44 years ago. So we do follow through on those promises. And we made a shift in our capital priorities to more heavily weight transit than roadways the last time around, and council supported that, and that was the recommendation not only of the administration but the endorsement of council.
Right.
And that was 2008.
Right. And with the tips list, that list gets prioritized and reprioritized and moved around.
Yes, it is a living document.
Administration makes recommendations on it, but ultimately it's approved by council.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay. So the other thing I'd like you to comment on is that a lot of your plans read like network engineers who have written them, as opposed to people interested in serving customers. Now, how do you feel about being in charge of a transit department that is characterized that way? Or, is that how you feel about it?
Well, I have one of these iron rings, so I might be jaded there, Your Worship. But while I don't like that comment, I think I take away from it that we have to write these reports and communicate with the public more. We have to improve the way that we're communicating our plans to the public. I think we do have the public's best interests at heart, but we need to evolve how we're looking at those things. So I try to take that with a positive outlook.
So the final area I'd like to ask you about is TOD, and many of us have certainly been very supportive of TOD over the years, but I know that there's been a lack of prioritizing TOD stations. We want TODs. First of all, we passed the transit-orientated guidelines policy 3 years ago. But in my view, we've never put the resources behind executing it throughout the city and planning it as we did with Brentwood and others. So, pardon me?
7 years ago.
Right. So, how do you, if you could comment on some of the observations that Alderman Cabra has made and Calgary Transit's commitment to understanding the nature of TOD and how it fits into the overall mobility of Calgarians, I would appreciate your views on that. And what resources are required to actually make this happen?
Your Worship, I think that Transportation Department has been firmly behind TOD for easily more than 2 decades. But it has been very difficult at times to get land use decisions that would support TOD development. And councils change over time and this council has been very, very supportive of TOD. That hasn't always been the case. I mean, I remember sitting through council decisions. The ones that jump into mind in my time at the city are some of the decisions that we made at the Crowfoot Centre to pull office out and put car dealerships in, despite administration saying we do not recommend doing this. So to characterize the administration as not being TOD supportive is I don't think that's a fair comment. And we've also have headed off decisions along the South Line at times where we could have expeditiously developed the land to retail, auto-orientated retail, but we have held off on those decisions and are looking for a richer development of those lands that's more transit-oriented. So I think I have seen some good decisions being made, and I see a council here that's much more committed to it. So when the market starts to pick up, I think we're going to be extremely well positioned, and we're learning. I mean, this is a new phase of development for the city.
So we've had a significant leadership change in Calgary Transportation. You're a new general manager. I know that requires probably a culture shift. But what direction do you need from council for this next 3-year budgeting cycle in order to move more intentionally, deliberately in this area? We've had a lot of concentration on hard infrastructure like interchanges and a variety of other things. So what direction do you need from council that you, in order for us to accelerate this priority?
Your Worship, trying to bring it, I guess, to in the light of this particular topic that we've been discussing, the direction that I'm taking away from today's meeting and the LPT meeting last week is that our analysis has to be detailed. And we have to show the options that we look at, not just summarize them in a report. Our direction that we've asked in the LPT 2011-02 was the BRT direction. And that's sort of part of our strategy, or part of what we think is how we move forward towards realizing the Calgary Transportation Plan. So the direction that we'll be looking at coming into TIIP will be the balance that council wants to see between transit investment, pedestrian investment, and road investment. And so that'll be a key. And I'm taking away from all of these issues that have been coming up over the last 3 months with this new council to try to get a sense of where that weighting is coming. We have evaluated a number of different investment opportunities for our new funding. Today brings up some further options. But my counsel to council at this point would be we need to be careful about the decisions we make today so that we still have options in the future.
Right. So finally, do you have the resources you need to do this work? And I don't know whether it comes out of an innovation fund or whatever it needs to sort of bring this together and make this happen in a timely manner. Do you have the resources? You have to kind of fix the airplane in flight here. So,
Your Worship, I think the biggest challenge is, with respect to resources, is time. We have been funded, I think, generously so that we can do the studies that we need. I think our biggest challenge really has been time, and with respect to time, engaging not only council but the public. I mean, I heard earlier today about dissatisfaction with public engagement on an issue, and and also a changing form of public engagement. So that's really the toughest challenge that we have, is to do these studies to the best of our ability requires time, and there will be times when we will have to ask council for patience, if you will.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me to go on and get these answers.
No problem, Alderman Collyer-Cart. This stuff is important. So, any other debate on the amendment? On the amendment, Alderman Farrell to close? Closed? All right. On this amendment, then, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. So back then to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion before I call on Alderman Chabot to close? Okay, Alderman Chabot. I would like to hear Alderman Chabot's thoughts on the changes of today.
Oh, no.
I'll try not to be brief. Well, it's kind of a softening of the position that the committee had taken specifically in regards to dedicating funds to particular projects. Although I think in the end the intent remains pretty much the same insofar as council's objectives and the direction that we want to give to administration moving forward in regards to our commitment both to four-car systems as well as to providing increased public transportation service into the southeast. I know there's been some comments about us being reactionary in regards to our planning, specifically on public transportation, and that maybe more focus should be placed on the planning of our areas. And there's no doubt that we need to work in both of those directions. However, we do have a built form that we have to respond to try and provide public transportation in those areas where we have already approved plans, and we do have communities that are developing in those areas, and there is a need to provide that means of transportation into those areas, as well as enhancing some of the public transportation systems that we have in place. As was identified in the report, the 17th Avenue corridor specifically is operating at a significantly reduced level of service as compared to other BRT lines, and hence the reason with why there was an intent to focus a lot or significant amount of resources towards the improvement of that particular line. And in essence, by improving the 305 line, you will consequently also improve the 302 line because of the connectivity on 9th Avenue, where there seems to be a bit of a congestion that's created along that line. So anyways, Council, I hope you support this, and I'm looking forward to further debate on exactly how we're going to allocate these funds and what kind of direction we're going to give to administration in how to best implement those to maximize on our public transportation system. So thank you, Your Worship. Close.
Thanks, Alderman Chabot. So on the motion then as amended, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. Alderman Collyer-Cart, you have an arising?
Your Worship, Madam Clerk, if we could put up the number 6 that was on the original stuff I gave you. And I know it doesn't seem directly related to this matter, but it was the issue arose since LPT with administration, and when we're moving in this direction, we can't lose sight of the fact that there is a significant life cycle refurbishment and replacement requirements. And so what the motion arising says is to direct administration, it's in front of you, Council, it was in that handout, to provide a report as soon as practically possible outlining the optimal life cycle refurbishment and replacement requirements for all existing LRVs to ensure LRT system reliability. I think this piece of work would be very important as we're starting to look at the next 3-year budget cycle. So, and Mr. Wong's advice was to just do it as soon as practically possible, Your Worship.
Can I add a clause just like the one you added to the other one that said timeline to come to the March 16th meeting of LPT?
Is that possible?
And that's the timeline, not the report.
Yeah, the
Sure.
timeline on the report.
Yes.
Just so then they can all come together
Yes.
as a work plan. So, Madam Clerk, can we just add exactly be an A and a B? A, direct administration to So, exactly, and make that B. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Perfect. All right, and Alderman Pincott is seconding. So any discussion on this item? All right, then, on this, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right, that takes us then to verbal report, strategic planning meeting date in February. Madam Clerk, I understand that we're changing the date from February 1 to 15th. You got a motion there? I'm sure that Alderman Pincott would be thrilled to put that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion to that the strategic planning meeting of council to be held on the 1st of February 2011 at 10:30 be cancelled, and that a special strategic planning meeting of council be held on February 15th of 2011 starting at 9:30.
Okay, do I have... Thanks, Alderman Stevenson. Did you say where? Madam Clerk, the motion doesn't say where. Was there a where on the original? Alderman Collier-Cart, is that the one you wanted to do at the Brand Room?
Yeah, I think at the previous council meeting we had talked about having administration explore whether the other locations such as at the Stampede would be suitable, but I don't know if they've done that work yet.
Your Worship, Brand Room would not be available on that day.
Oh, okay.
It's a board meeting.
Okay.
Should we do it at the Water Center?
Then Water Center or here.
All right, we'll leave it. We'll leave it, and if we want to change it, we still have one more council meeting that we can change it at. All right, then. So I had a seconder, right? Alderman Stevenson, thank you. Any discussion on this? All right, are we agreed? Carried. Time to go in camera. Can I have a motion to move in camera, please? Alderman Lowe, seconded Alderman McLeod. Sorry, Alderman Hodges. I know it's always supposed to be you. All right, then. On the motion to move in camera, are we agreed? Very well, then. We are in camera. All righty. And we're back. Alderman Hodges?
Move that the committee rise and report, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Marr. Are we agreed? Very well. Alderman Chabot?
Motion to change the time of recess to the conclusion of this agenda.
Thanks, Alderman Marr. You're seconding? Agreed. Okay, on that one, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right, Alderman Collier-Cart.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two items. Number one, regarding the Police Commission appointment, Alderman Lowe seconding, that Council confirm the appointment of Mr. Rodney Fong to the Calgary Police Commission for a 2-year term to expire in 2012, November 1st, and that the discussion with respect to the verbal report with the Police Commission appointments remain confidential under Section 17 and 19 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Okay, and Alderman Lowe, you're seconding that? Any discussion on that one?
Yes.
Oh, Alderman Chabot? Yeah.
Yeah, very briefly, Your Worship. I know there was 2 appointments short of putting the other name forward. I won't be supporting the appointment.
All righty. Anyone else? Okay, on the motion to appoint Mr. Fong then to the Police Commission, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Any opposed? Alderman Chabot? Thank you. All right, Alderman Collier-Cart.
And Your Worship, on another matter in relation to personnel matters, that the verbal report on personnel matters be received for information and remain confidential under Section 17(1) and 19 of the FOIP Act.
And that refers to the 3 discussions we just had.
Yes.
So do I have a seconder for that? Alderman Lowe, thank you. On that one, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. All right, Alderman Jones.
I'd like to move AOC 2010-118, review of council compensation review, committee mandate, and bylaw 32M 2008, that council adopt the Aldermanic Office Coordinating Committee's recommendations as contained in Report AOC 2010-118 and give 3 readings to the proposed bylaw 8M 2011.
All right, do I have a seconder? Thanks, Alderman Lowe. So on the recommendations, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Any opposed? Alderman Hodges is opposed. I have to do the bylaw.
And, right.
So first reading of the bylaw, then, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Second reading of the bylaw, are we? Oh, Alderman Hodges is opposed. Second reading of the bylaw, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Any opposed? Alderman Hodges. Authorization for third reading of the bylaw, are we agreed? Any opposed? Very well, then. Third reading of the bylaw, are we agreed? Any opposed? Alderman Hodges is opposed. Carried. Thank you. Alderman
And
Jones.
Your Worship, AOC 2011-07, the referral from Council, Notice of Motion 2011-01, review of ward office resources to better serve constituents, that the Aldermanic Office Coordinating Committee's recommendations contained in the report AOC 2011-07 be adopted.
All right, do I have a seconder? I heard it. Alderman Farrell. Thank you, Alderman Farrell. On that one, are we agreed? Agreed. Any opposed? Alderman Hodges is opposed. Carried. All right, Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. Resignation appointment to Heritage Authority Calgary, N 2011-04, that Council accept the resignation of Mr. Jack Coldwell as an elector member of the Heritage Authority, effective immediately, and that he be thanked for his service. And 2, appoint Mr. Jim Cullen as an elector member to the Heritage Authority Calgary for completion of a 3-year term to expire 2011 October. Oh, no. To expire
11, yes.
Oh, okay.
2011
Yep.
October at our
You're right.
organization.
Direct that the attachments remain confidential under Section 17(1) and 19 of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act.
I'll second.
I think Alderman Chabot is seconding that. So on that one, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. Alderman Keating.
Thank you, Your Worship. CPS 2011-07, financing options for recreation facilities in Calgary, subject to receiving confirmation of funding from PPP Canada that Council support, a PPP procurement model for a bundle of 4 recreation facilities in Calgary Southeast, including Great Plains, Quarry Park, and Seaton, and in Calgary Northwest. Number 2, to direct administration to work with PPP Canada to develop mutually agreeable term sheets and financing agreement. B, to conduct the due diligence to prove positive financial benefit of a P3 arrangement for the recreation facility bundle under a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain model with a third-party contractor to provide programming for the facilities. And C, bring forward a strategy to confirm funding sources are available to cover the remaining financing requirement to proceed with this recreational facility bundle, and report back no later than June 2011 with a progress update, and direct that this report and its attachment remain confidential under sections 24.1A and 24.1G and 25.1C2 of the Freedom of Information Protection Act in Alberta.
At one point, Your Worship, I wonder if administration could just ensure that there's a communication, particularly, I'm of course interested in Northwest Society, but also I'm sure to those in the Southeast who are involved in this, so they're apprised fully of where we are, the status of the land. They're feeling a little bit left out of the loop at the moment. Thank you, Your Worship.
Absolutely.
I also think it's incumbent on the area alderman as well to make sure that this communication is well done. It's a good news story, and we should tell that good news story.
And I was waiting for something to deliver to my ward presidents the other day, Your Worship, and it didn't show up.
Shockingly, I got a little busy on Thursday and Friday, Alderman Lowe, but you have it now.
Okay.
All right. Any others on this one? Okay. So on this motion, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. Alderman Pincott.
Thank you. I have PAC 2011-04, the naming of a park, and the motion I have is that we accept the recommendations that are contained within the report, which are namely the naming of an existing park in the community of Pump Hill to Patton Park.
Thanks, Alderman Collier-Urquhart. On that one, are we agreed? Any opposed? Carried. Alderman Hodges? Are we ready, Madam Clerk? Did I miss any?
Move to waive.
Hold on. Sorry.
I'd move to waive it unless someone wants to hear it, have it read. I move to waive.
Okay, I've never done that before. What do we do when we move to waive?
We don't read.
Oh, we just waive the reading.
It's still on
Okay.
the record. We just
Gotcha.
don't read it.
All right, second. Are we agreed on that? Okay. Oh, Alderman Chabot is opposed.
I'll move adjournment, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any excuse for absence of members? No, we're all here. And move to adjourn, Alderman Hodges. And we have a seconder, Alderman Jones. Thank you. Are we agreed? We are adjourned. Thank you for your work.